Act 1. The Weight of Unspoken Midnight. The rain against the glass did not fall in steady rhythms. It hammered like a slow, deliberate pulse, counting down the remaining hours until dawn. In the small, dimly lit room overlooking the damp cobblestones of Old Town, Gabriel sat with his palms flat against the scarred oak desk. Beside his left hand lay a crisp, cream-colored envelope. It was an invitation, embossed in sleek silver script, that he had spent 3 weeks trying to burn, only to pull it back from the flame every single time. Clara Vance and Julian Thorne request the honor of your presence. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, the woman who used to sleep with her head pressed over Gabriel's heart would walk down the aisle of St. Jude's Chapel. She would wear white. She would smile at a man who was safe, a man whose hands had never been stained by scandal, and she would say the words that were once promised only to Gabriel. Gabriel picked up his fountain pen. His fingers, calloused and steady through years of physical labor he had never been raised to perform, trembled slightly as the nib hovered over a blank sheet of heavy stationery. He didn't expect her to read it tonight. He wasn't even sure if he had the right to send it. But silence, he realized, was a rot that had eaten away 5 years of his life, and he could no longer carry the weight of her hatred into the quiet eternity of his own isolation. Dear Clara, he wrote, the dark blue ink soaking hungrily into the fiber. If you are reading this, the sun has likely risen on the day your life begins anew. You are sitting in front of a mirror, surrounded by white roses, wondering why a ghost of your past still haunts the margins of your mind. I am writing this not to pull you back into the wreck of who I used to be, but because you deserve to walk toward your future without the lie I forced you to live. He paused, resting his forehead in his hand, letting the sound of the rain wash over him. In his mind, she was still 24, standing on the balcony of their tiny first apartment, her hair wild in the spring breeze, laughing as they split a $1 slice of pizza and spoke about the empires they were going to build together. She had loved him with a fierce, unquestioning purity, and he had destroyed that love with surgical, devastating precision. Act 2. The Anatomy of a Ruin. 5 years ago, Gabriel Hayes had not been a ghost sitting in a rented attic apartment. He had been a rising star at Vance, Hayes Architecture, engaged to the founder's daughter. Clara's father, Arthur Vance, was a titan of industry, a man Gabriel looked up to as a second father. But Titans fall, and Arthur's fall was silent, brutal, and fatal. It started with a single frantic phone call from Arthur in the middle of a November night. Gabriel had rushed to the office to find the older man collapsed behind his desk, clutching his chest, sobbing over documents that revealed millions missing from the client escrow accounts. Arthur hadn't spent it on luxury. He had been systematically blackmailed by a defunct offshore investment syndicate over a debt from his youth. The prosecutors were already quietly building an indictment. The scandal would not only destroy Arthur, it would bankrupt Clara, strip her of her license, and brand her family name with irredeemable disgrace. Arthur's heart was already failing. If I go to prison, Gabriel, the old man had wept, grabbing Gabriel's lapels with trembling, frail fingers, it will kill me in a month. And Clara, she will carry my shame forever. They will take her home, her studio, her dignity. Protect her. Please, protect my little girl. 2 days later, Arthur suffered a massive stroke that left him nonverbal, lingering in a hospital bed. The authorities came knocking at the firm's doors 48 hours later. Gabriel had made his choice in the cold space of a heartbeat. He didn't consult Clara. He knew if he told her, she would fight him, she would insist on telling the truth, she would let the world burn before she let Gabriel take the fall. So, He took it alone. He altered the digital logs to point every fraudulent transfer directly to his own accounts. He signed a confession detailing a phantom addiction and reckless trading. To make the lie absolute, he had to kill her love for him. If she believed he was a martyr, she would spend her youth waiting for a convict, living in the shadow of a grand, tragic romance. She needed to be free. She needed to move on. So, during her visits to the county jail before his trial, Gabriel played the monster. He looked through the plexiglass into her tear-streaked eyes and lied with a chilling, detached detachment. He told her he had used her. He told her he only proposed to cement his place in her father's firm. He told her he had never truly loved her. He still remembered the exact moment her heart broke. The warm light in her dark brown eyes didn't just dim, it vanished, replaced by an abyss of utter betrayal. She had slapped her hand against the glass, stripped her engagement ring off her finger, tossed it onto the ledge, and walked out. She never returned. Gabriel served 3 years in federal custody. When he was released, Arthur had already passed away, and Clara had rebuilt her life from the ashes, eventually meeting Julian, a good, steady man who had never hurt her. Act 3. The unsaid words. Gabriel wiped a stray drop of moisture from his cheek. He told himself it was rain from the open window, but the salt on his lips gave him away. He dipped the pen back into the inkwell. "I let you hate me, Clara," he wrote, his voice echoing in his own mind like a phantom narrator. Because hatred is a clean blade. It cuts fast, and it heals into a thick, protective scar. Grief, on the other hand, is a slow poison. If you thought I was a victim, you would have consumed yourself trying to save me. I needed you to heal, even if the medicine was my own damnation. He set the pen down for a moment, his chest heaving under the weight of 5 years of enforced silence. How many of us walk through this world dragging heavy trunks of unspoken words behind us? We hold back the truth out of fear, out of a misguided desire to protect, or simply because time slips through our fingers like fine sand until the moment has passed. We convince ourselves that silence is safer than exposure, forgetting that the hearts we leave in the dark eventually stop looking for our light. If you have words burning in your chest, if there is someone in your life who needs to know the truth of how deeply they were loved, or why you had to walk away, do not let the clock run out. We often wait for a dramatic moment that never comes, letting relationships fade into quiet regret. That is why tangible, intentional connection matters so deeply. In a world full of fleeting text messages and digital noise, taking the time to put your soul into something real can alter the course of a life. Today's sponsor, Straight Line Cards, understands the transformative power of the written word. Whether you are seeking to heal an old wound, express a love that has endured through quiet years, or simply remind someone that they were never forgotten, Straight Line Cards allows you to craft deeply personal, physical cards and curated keepsake gifts delivered directly to those who hold your heart. You can customize every line, choose heavy linen stocks, and even include personalized tokens that turn a simple message into a lifelong memory. Don't leave your most important feelings in an unsent draft. Visit straightlinecards.com today and use the code RECOVERS to get 20% off your first custom card and gift package. Say what needs to be said before the silence becomes permanent. Act 4. The Dawn of Truth. Gabriel picked up the pen once more as the sky outside his window began to turn from black to a bruised, violet gray. The rain had softened into a gentle drizzle. Arthur died in peace. Clara, Gabriel wrote, his hand moving faster now, as if racing against the sunrise. He died knowing his daughter's reputation was unsullied, that her inheritance was safe, and that she would have a future. Every night I spent in that cell, I survived by imagining you building your life again. I heard about your new firm. I saw the pictures of your parks, your libraries, your beautiful buildings. You fulfilled every dream we ever drew on those cheap paper napkins." He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Julian is a good man. I know he treats you with the gentleness you always deserved. I am not writing this to stop you from stepping into that chapel today. God knows I have no right to ask for a place in your life. But as you walk down that aisle, I need you to know one thing: you were never unlovable. You were never foolish for trusting me. You were loved with a devotion so absolute that it gladly traded its freedom so you could keep yours." He signed his name at the bottom. Not Gabriel Hayes, the convict. Not Gabriel, your former business partner. Just Gabriel. He folded the letter 3 times, slid it into the heavy cream envelope, and sealed it with a stamp of dark red wax. He didn't mail it. Instead, he pulled on his worn leather jacket, grabbed his umbrella, and walked out into the chilly morning air. By 8 in the morning, Gabriel was standing outside the rear entrance of St. Jude's Chapel. The air smelled of wet earth and early morning lilies. Deliveries of flowers were being rushed through the side doors. He spotted Maya, Clara's lifelong best friend and her maid of honor, stepping out onto the porch, clutching a garment bag and looking stressed. Gabriel stepped out from behind the stone pillar. "Maya." Maya froze, her eyes widening in shock, then instantly hardening into armor. "Gabriel? What the hell are you doing here? If Clara sees you." "She won't," Gabriel said softly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the sealed envelope. "I am leaving. I am boarding a train north at noon, and I won't come back. But she needs to have this. Not after the ceremony. Before." "She hates you, Gabriel," Maya hissed, though her voice softened slightly as she looked at his hollow cheeks and the faint lines of grief etched deep around his eyes. "You broke her." "I know," Gabriel murmured. "Just give it to her, Maya. Please. It's the last thing I will ever ask of anyone." Maya looked at the envelope, then at Gabriel's desperate, tired eyes. She saw something in him that she hadn't seen 5 years ago. Not a cold villain, but a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. Without a word, she took the letter. Gabriel nodded once, turned his collar up against the wind, and walked away into the morning mist. Act 5. The White Dress and the Red Wax. Inside the bridal suite of St. Jude's, the air was thick with the scent of hairspray, expensive perfume, and crushed white roses. Clara stood in front of the floor-to-length mirror, staring at her reflection. The dress was breathtaking, delicate French lace, sweeping train, a veil that trailed like morning fog behind her. She looked like a queen. Yet, inside her chest, there was a quiet, familiar numbness. She loved Julian. He was kind, attentive, and consistent. He had brought her peace. But peace was not the same as the fiery, soul-consuming joy she had once known, a joy she had buried deep in the earth 5 years ago. The door slipped open, and Maya stepped in, shutting it firmly behind her. The bridesmaids were out in the hallway laughing. "Maya, is the photographer here?" Clara asked, adjusting an earring with a trembling hand. "My hands won't stop shaking." Maya didn't answer right away. She walked slowly across the plush carpet and stood beside Clara. In her hand, she held the cream envelope. "Someone left this for you," Maya said quietly. "He said you needed to read it before you walk down the aisle." Clara glanced down. The red wax seal bore a simple, familiar emblem, an interlocking G and C stamp they had bought together at a flea market in Florence years ago. Clara's breath hitched. Her color drained from her face. "No, take it away, Maya. I don't want it." "Clara, look at the handwriting," Maya whispered gently, setting it on the vanity beside Clara's bouquet. "He's leaving the city forever. He just left." For a full minute, the room was completely silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Clara stared at her name on the envelope. Her heart beat against her ribs like a trapped bird. 5 years of anger, 5 years of telling herself she meant nothing to him, 5 years of safe, quiet survival hung in the balance. With a sudden, desperate movement, she snatched the letter. She broke the red wax, her fingers trembling so violently she nearly tore the paper. She unfolded the sheets, and the familiar, elegant slant of Gabriel's handwriting flooded her vision. "Dear Clara." As she read, the room around her vanished. She read about her father's weeping confession in the dark office. She read about the millions stolen by extortionists, the imminent prison sentence that would have killed Arthur, and the scandal that would have stripped her of her license and her life's work. She read about the fake ledgers, the staged addiction, and the brutal lie Gabriel had spat at her through the visitation glass so she wouldn't waste her life waiting for a man in prison. "I let you hate me, Clara, because hatred is a clean blade." A tear hit the center of the page, smudging the word devotion. Clara collapsed into the vanity chair, clutching the letter to her chest, sob after sob tearing through her body. Maya stepped forward, wrapping her arms around her friend's shoulders as Clara wept, not tears of heartbreak, but the catastrophic release of 5 years of unearned shame and phantom betrayal. He hadn't discarded her. He hadn't used her. He had loved her so much that he had stepped into hell and pulled the trapdoor closed over his own head just so she could walk in the sun. "Oh God," Clara choked out, her voice raw, buried in the lace of her sleeve. "Oh God, Gabriel." "Clara," Maya said softly, tears glistening in her own eyes. "Julian is waiting downstairs. The guests are arriving." Clara looked up into the mirror. Her mascara was ruined, her eyes were bloodshot, but for the first time in 5 years, the light in her dark brown eyes was burning, a roaring, unstoppable fire. She looked down at the letter. She looked toward the door that led to the sanctuary, where Julian, a good man who deserved a woman who loved him with her whole heart, not a woman living a lie, was waiting. And then she looked toward the window that faced the rain-slicked street. Where was he going? Clara asked, her voice steadying, stripping away the despair until only pure, fierce resolve remained. "The train station," Maya whispered. "He said his train leaves at noon." Clara looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:15 a.m. Slowly, deliberately, Clara reached up and unpinned her veil. She set it gently on the table beside her bridal bouquet. She reached into her handbag, pulled out a pen, and pulled a piece of paper toward her. She wrote 4 short lines to Julian, a confession of truth, an apology from the bottom of her soul, and a release from a marriage that would have been built on the silent ghost of another man's sacrifice. She laid her ring on top of the note. Then, gathering the heavy, elegant folds of her white gown into her arms, Clara Vance kicked off her high heels, took a deep breath, and ran through the side door of the chapel out into the rain. Epilogue. Grand Central at noon. The train station was a cavernous hall of echoed announcements, rushing commuters, and the heavy hiss of steam and iron. Gabriel stood near platform 4, his small canvas duffel bag resting at his feet. He looked up at the large black clock mounted above the concourse. 11:52 a.m. He felt a strange, terrifying sense of peace. The letter was delivered. The burden was lifted. She knew the truth, and even if she stayed with Julian, even if she walked down that aisle and never looked back, she would live the rest of her life knowing she had been cherished beyond measure. Boarding for the 12 o'clock express to Chicago, track 4, the loudspeaker blared. Gabriel reached down and scooped up his bag. He turned toward the gate. Gabriel. The voice didn't come from a ghost. It echoed off the high marble arches, sharp, breathless, and undeniable. Gabriel stopped. His heart slammed into his ribs so violently he couldn't breathe. He slowly turned around. Standing 20 yards away in the middle of the crowded concourse was Clara. Her hair was damp and plastered to her face. The bottom 3 feet of her white lace wedding dress were soaked and stained with dark street rainwater, and she was breathing heavily, clutching a crumpled piece of cream paper in her right hand. The rushing crowd seemed to melt away into a blurred backdrop. Gabriel dropped his bag. Clara, what are you doing here? Your wedding. You idiot. She sobbed, stepping forward, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. You absolute, arrogant, selfless idiot. Gabriel took a step toward her, his hands hovering in the air, as if he were afraid she would shatter if he touched her. Clara, you were supposed to be safe. You were supposed to marry Julian. I don't want safe, Gabriel. She cried out, tears streaming freely down her face as she closed the distance between them. I don't want a life built on a sanctuary you bought for me with your own blood. How could you think I would want to walk in the light if it meant leaving you in the dark? She reached him. Without waiting for him to speak, she threw her arms around his neck, burying her face into the damp leather of his jacket. Gabriel froze for a fraction of a second, overwhelmed by the warmth of her, the scent of white roses and rain, before his arms wrapped fiercely around her waist, lifting her slightly off her feet. Holding her so tightly, he felt her heart pounding against his own. I missed you, she whispered into his ear, weeping against his neck. Every single day for 5 years, I missed you. Even when I hated you, I was just missing the man I thought you were. I never stopped loving you, Gabriel choked out, burying his face in her damp hair, letting his own tears fall freely at last. Not for a single second, Clara. Not for a single second. She pulled back just far enough to look into his eyes, her hands framing his face, wiping away his tears with her thumbs. The train is leaving, Gabriel, she whispered, looking toward the open gate behind him. Gabriel looked at the train, then down at the wet, ruined lace of her wedding dress, and finally, back into the brown eyes he had spent half a decade longing to see again. He smiled, a real, true smile that reached his eyes for the first time in 5 years. Let it leave, Gabriel said quietly, taking her hand and lacing his fingers through hers. My journey ends right here,